Welcome to the current commentary. Today's subject will be on the Labour Party conference and their decision for education. We have recently had the Labour Party conference where, certainly last year at least, they charged black people less than white people. So, the Labour Party's policies on education: to scrap Oftsted, replacing it with local authority health checks. These are meant to be more frequent and carried out by the local authority. However, this might be a bad look for a party that was in power both locally and nationally during the Rotherham abuse scandals, for example. The local governors of the school are already part of the local authority, and you'd expect them to be monitoring the school anyway. So these local authority health checks seem a bit obsolete, and they're just scrapping an institution for comparing schools. Their more dangerous policy, however, is to scrap fee-paying schools. They will do this initially by getting rid of their charitable status and forcing them to pay VAT, with a transition to integrate them into the state sector. This is basically stealing state schools from the public and putting them into public ownership. Now, for their justification of such radical policies. Fee-paying schools, they claim, exacerbate the class system. They believe it is unfair for people to benefit from a £30,000 a year education, while others only receive £6,300 from a state education. And the colloquial old boys network benefits the powerful people and their old school chums. Now, for the consequences. Britain will lose from the soft power caused by students from foreign countries coming to be educated at our schools, and then becoming leaders of their own countries. Due to things like a higher rate of income tax in the UK, a significant portion of people going to expensive boarding schools are actually overseas students. The affluent will homeschool their children with a private tutor or governess, like they used to do in the 19th century. There will be an increase in strain on the apparent underfunded state education system, as all of the previously private educated children that were giving up their place with no reduction in the tax the parents have to pay will now need to be educated by the state sector. Forced integration into the state sector is theft of private property by the state. Some of these will be held in trust by organizations, some are held by monastic organizations, so in common with a select group of religious people, or just owned by individuals. Now, what do people think? 22% of people support the ban, 50% oppose it, and 28% don't know. This policy is probably quite damaging for the Labour Party, despite the huge amount of support it has from its members. Now, Britain does not have the highest rated education system when you compare literacy rates and maths and IQ tests between different countries. So, here are some of my suggestions of how to improve things. Set up more grammar schools. The British education system was well respected internationally when there were lots of grammar schools. Many of the Conservative cabinet in recent years has been educated at grammar schools. Grammar schools are schools paid for by the state that only take a select group of pupils who make a certain attainment grade. If there are more grammar schools, there will be more places for said students, meaning more people from disadvantaged backgrounds willing to try hard will have a good education. Maintain VAT exemption for schools regardless of charitable status. As education is a necessity, it should not have VAT. Yes, there is the state provision, but there is the state provision of food, and food as a whole is exempt from VAT. Admittedly, there are luxury foods like chocolate biscuits, which do have VAT. A major cause for low attainment across private and state schools is disruptive children. My suggestion is for a state boarding school or schools to be set up for disruptive children. It should be in a rural place, such as Cairngorms or some old manor house surrounded by leafy fields or forests, as there will be less pressure to keep the students contained, as containment would make it feel like a prison. Since if students are miles away from the nearest source of trouble, it'll be very difficult for them to get to us somewhere where they can cause trouble. And now, let us admire the Labour Party education, shadow education secretary, and her glorious suggestions to make a better, cleaner Britain, free of inequality, free of those pesky public schoolboys from Eton, and so on, free from the curses of inequality, and where we are all intersectional and benefiting from checking our privilege, where people from around the world will have the right to come to Britain to receive anything they want from the state, from health to education. You have been listening to the current commenter. Good night.